Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We are beaming out to you and the entire world from the beautiful, historical, book-loving neighborhood of Reedville, the loveliest neighborhood in all of Boston. Here at Reading with Your Kids, we celebrate the power of stories. Stories that inspire, uplift, and remind us how strong families become when they read together. Whether you're joining us at the kitchen table, your classroom, or your car, we are so delighted that you're joining us. Please help us grow our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and let them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, YouTube. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. Wonderful guest for you today. Coming up, Shana Tartogsz will be here to celebrate the Underworld, Relic of Thieves. And later in the show, Tiffany Obing returns to celebrate her new middle grade series, Fairy Tales Verses. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by When Jungle Jim Comes to Visit Fred the Snake, written by Dr. Peter Cotton. Have you ever missed a friend so much you wish they could travel across the world just to see you? And when Jungle Jim comes to visit Fred the Snake, Fred is feeling really lonely. He misses his good friend Jungle Jim and all the wild adventures they used to share. But true friendship doesn't fade with distance. It finds a way. So Jungle Jim does something amazing. He sets sail on an old shipping boat, braving the wild seas, all to visit his buddy Fred in South Carolina. And he doesn't come alone. He brings along a whole animal menagerie and even a very special guest, a charming lady snake named Bernadette. This delightful story is filled with humor, heart, and the kind of joyful imagination kids absolutely love. But more than that, it's a beautiful reminder that friendship is worth the journey and that we're never truly alone when we care about one another. Written by Dr. Peter Cotton, who we loved having on Reading with Your Kids, this is another wonderful adventure in the beloved Fred the Snake series, a collection of stories that celebrate kindness, courage, and connection. So snuggle up, read together, and take a trip across the sea, because with Fred the Snake, every story is an adventure, and every adventure is filled with heart. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Portland and Oregon. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new middle grade novel. It's called The Underworld, Relic of Thieves. Please welcome to the show, Shana Tartogsz. Shana, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you, Jed?
I'm doing wonderful. Living the dream here in Boston. I'm so excited. The Underworld, Relic of Thieves, that is a fantastic title. As somebody in middle school, this would have caught my eye.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you.
Before we jump into the book, was the Relic of Thieves is part of the Underworld series. So from the moment that this story was conceived, did you know it was going to be called the Underworld?
Well, the Underworld, no, it's interesting because my first book sold as the title, my working title, which was Relic of Thieves. And the team and I kept trying to come up with other titles. They felt that River of Spirits might be a little too quiet of a title for middle schoolers. And so we kept bouncing ideas back and forth. And I always had the location of the Underworld in the book. Uh-huh. And so it just kind of naturally came together. They said, well, why not the Underworld? And my concern was, well, if it's just the Underworld, and if we have more stories to tell, I'm not sure what I would call the next book. So then they said, well, my brilliant publisher said, well, why don't we do the Underworld, River of Spirits, and then any future books can keep being called the Underworld, and then a supplementary title.
Okay. Yeah, they're the marketing geniuses, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
They know that works. So who are we going to meet in Relic of Thieves?
So Relic of Thieves follows the story of a living girl named Anya. And the reason why I say living girl is because in book 1, we meet Senka, who is the apprentice farrier of the dead, and she lives in the underworld. So there's a distinction between the realm of the dead, which is where Senka lives with her mentor and guardian Charon, who is the farrier of the underworld, and the living realm, which is where us mortals live. So book 2 diverts from Senka's perspective and goes into Anya's perspective. And Anya lives in our world. She is a student at a local middle school. And her story begins when her best friend tells her that she's moving away. And Anya's best friend is named Lizzie. And Lizzie has been Anya's support system. And the place that she goes to when she's afraid, the place that she goes to where she feels most welcome, where she feels like she belongs. And so losing Anya is just earth-shattering for Earth. Anya losing her best friend Lizzie is earth-shattering for Anya. So that is where the story begins. And would you like me to keep talking about it?
Yeah. Well, before you keep talking, I'm just curious if Senka is alive and doing things that we can write about, and Anya is alive. What's the difference between being dead and alive in the universe of the underworld?
Oh, okay. Well, the underworld. You have the denizens of the underworld. The underworld. The underworld is a section of the underworld, which is kind of the wilds, which haven't been explored. The locations change. They shift places. So it's an unmappable location. And that is where a lot of lost souls roam. So there's wicked gods. There's Tartarus is found in the underworld, which is where imprisoned gods and immortals live. And so there's really not, per se, living mortals in the underworld and the underworld, which is why Senka is smack dab in the middle of the river that divides the realm of the living from the realm of the dead. So she is a denizen of the underworld. She has lived there for many years with Charon, her guardian. And so living people usually don't come into the underworld itself. So that's the distinction.
I don't think I'd like to visit the underworld.
I know it doesn't sound like a pleasant place, but it is full of lots of adventure. And there are some pretty fantastic people to meet. And in fact, book 2 explores the underworld and the underworld a lot more. And we meet more of the people we had heard about in book 1.
Uh-huh.
So, in book 1, we find out that Senka's tutor is a giant messenger raven. And the giant messenger raven is taller than a basketball player and can carry people on their backs. And they can transport mail throughout the underworld and into other realms. And in book 2, we find out more about this group of creatures. We find out more about the messenger ravens. We meet the messenger raven queen, who also lives in the underworld in a special area. And so we really do meet more of the mythical creatures that are in Greek mythology and not in Greek mythology that have been introduced into this world. So it isn't a terrible place to visit, but you do have to be prepared.
Yeah. Well, when I say I wouldn't want to visit it now that I'm an old man, can't run that fast. But as a kid, it absolutely would be something that would grab my attention and really drag me in. This was, I remember, you're not old enough to remember this, but Led Zeppelin's House of the Holy, there was just this kind of haunting image on the album cover. Again, album, you don't know what that is, but on the package that the music came in when we had to put it on the disc and put the needle, and it was just this kind of haunting image. And I thought, wow, what's going on in that world? And I'd love to find out what's going on there. And yeah. So as a kid, I'd love to visit the underworld.
And you know what? That's how I was when I was a kid, honestly. When I heard stories about Charon, this farrier of the underworld who ferried souls from life into their afterlife, into the underworld itself, I just kept going, is that all he does all day? Like that's pretty terrible for him, right? He's an immortal. That's all he does. And so that's where the story was born from, was that childhood curiosity about the underworld, about what else is there. What are these areas that we hear about? But it was all very amorphic, right? It was the Field of Elysium. It was Asphodel, and the river Styx, and the different rivers. There's 5 rivers in Greek mythology, and all 5 of those rivers we see in the Underworld series.
I don't know about you. As I look back, I'm thinking maybe my interest in this, fascination, this may have been born from, going to church and hearing about heaven and hell and all that. Do you think that might have spurred your interest on too when you were younger?
That's a good question. I just think that I always loved stories, and we did learn about Greek mythology in, I think it was, I can't remember if it was 6th grade or, 7th grade, early middle school is when I first heard about it. Oh no, I take that back. It was even earlier. It was like 5th grade. We started learning about different mythological, gods and creatures, and Pegasus when I was a little girl, the winged horse. What is more magnificent and special than that? And that's really where my interest sparked, was these stories of these creatures and these places that humans really couldn't reach. And I found that so intriguing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I wonder, it's fun to think back as to where these stories came from. Was it, just a very talented storyteller sitting around and thinking, oh, I know how to entertain the group tonight? Or mm-hmm. was there something that they were seeing and experiencing, and this is how they explained it to themselves?
Oh, definitely. It was definitely how humans made sense of the world around them. I mean, myth is born from asking those questions, like, where does a bee come from? That's a Greek myth. That Melissa is the name of the immortal who became a bee. She brought this substance to, I think it was Zeus's wedding to Hera. And please, anybody who's a Greek mythology nerd, please forgive me right now if I get it wrong, because my brain is a little soft because of writing other projects right now. But the story of Melissa, she brought the substance to Zeus, and he had promised anybody who could bring the special treat to my wedding will have any wish granted, basically. And she brought honey. And at the time, Greek gods didn't know what honey was. And so this was the first time honey was tasted. And she asked for help to harvest the honey. And she said, it's really hard to harvest this. My request is, can I please, have help? I'm doing this all day long. It takes a lot of work. And he turned her into a bee, and then more bees were generated. And then that's how she got her help, right? Is that bees were born of this myth. And there's all sorts of myths like that are kind of like, this is how this came to be. The myth of Arachne and spiders. I'm not sure if you know that one, where...
Fill me in. Tell me.
Okay. Arachne was a mortal woman who was a great weaver. And she spun these most beautiful tapestries and fabrics. And there's a couple different variations of the story. One is that she was bragging that she was better than even Athena. And Athena is a goddess who is known for how great her weaving is. Other stories say that it was the townsfolk who said, oh, this mortal woman, she's better than the goddess. She's better than the goddess. And the goddess heard. And so the goddess Athena came down and challenged Arachne to a competition. Who would be the best weaver? And then when Arachne won, in her rage, one of the stories goes, is that Athena turned Arachne into a spider, because no mortal can ever be better than a god. Mm. So, there's different variations of these myths, but this is kind of, I think, how people made sense of the world around them, how they wanted to bring storytelling into, their circle, into their community. And it was just, these stories passed, people to people, word of mouth. It's pretty amazing.
How does it feel, or have you thought about the fact that you've become one of these Greek storytellers, writing the Underworld?
Yeah, I feel extremely privileged and extremely lucky that I am here doing this, because this is honestly, if I could go back in time and tell, me in 5th grade, this is what you will be doing in your future, I wouldn't have believed it. There's no way. I would have been like, you're joking. Like, that would be just too mind-blowing for me as a kid. And now that I'm doing it, I'm just having so much fun diving into these worlds of myth and exploring more obscure myths that are present in older texts, but they're not at the forefront of our mind. They're not like the bigger, let me try to think of some bigger as well. Hades and Persephone is probably one of the bigger myths, and that's definitely in the forefront of my mind because I explore that myth in Relic of Thieves. That's something that one thing I love to do with my books is take a familiar Greek myth and examine it and then turn it on its head and say, okay, we know the beats of these stories. We know that Persephone was taken into the underworld by Hades, and she now is married to Hades, but she ate pomegranate seeds and she ate 6 of them, which meant that she has to stay 6 months in the underworld and then she can return home to her mother's side. And for those 6 months, she is up in the world with the other gods, out of the underworld. And then that was a myth that was created to explain the changing of the seasons. So when Persephone is in our world, like up here out of the underworld, that's when spring happens. That's when the flowers start blooming again. She's back up on earth. Her mother Demeter, the goddess of the harvest and of plants, is happy again. So the plants start blooming. And so spring and summer is when Persephone is here. And then Persephone travels back to the underworld in the fall. And then everything goes fallow in the winter because her mother is depressed and won't allow the plants to grow because she's so sad until Persephone returns again. So this was another myth that was created to explain the changing of our seasons. So I examined that myth in Relic of Thieves because I wanted to tell that story from Persephone's perspective. We never hear it from her perspective. It's always, she was taken into the underworld by Hades and forced to be his wife, and now she's stuck in this cycle.
Yeah. One of the things I oftentimes ask an author is what kind of conversations can families have if they're reading the Underwild together or co-reading it and then coming together. But I'm thinking, and I think there's probably lots and lots of conversations that can come, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I'm thinking this really could launch a love of the classics and myths, and maybe get these middle school kids interested in getting into the Greek club when they get to high school and college.
Right. Yeah. I really do believe that just the power of story. It's the power of story that connects us, that really dives into what it means to be human, what it means to be alive. And I would love for families to pick up the Underwild series and read these myths and these stories of different Greek gods, goddesses, different creatures. One of the creatures that I introduce in Relic of Thieves is Cerberus. Cerberus. Excuse me, I'm mispronouncing things today. Who is the three-headed dog of the underworld. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
You probably catch it from me. I can't speak English many times.
That's so funny. So this three-headed dog is Hades' hound, and he guards the gates of the underworld. And it's just another fascinating creature. Like, there's a three-headed dog in the underworld. And I love that. Pegasus is also in my book. And Pegasus is another Greek mythical creature. So all of these creatures, it's fun to kind of explore and talk about, and where did they come from, and how did they come to be in these stories. And I just love introducing these elements from ancient history to kids and to families, because I think it's such a fascinating topic to talk about.
Yeah. We talk to a lot of authors of fantasy here, and I'm always fascinated by how they can keep their universe and the physics of their universe that they're creating straight. You're you have a different challenge in that you are writing creatively within a universe that's ancient and that has rules. So you kind of got to stick to some of the rules that exist here. Was that a special challenge for you?
It is, yes. And like I said, I do a lot of research. I love reading stories, different interpretations. There's some brilliant works out there by Edith Hamilton, who wrote a giant book about, let's see, the 1930s. kind of like an excellent mentor text. And then more modern retellings is Stephen Fry, who is hilarious, the national treasure of Great Britain.
Uh-huh.
And so you have these different storytellers who go back into the myths and read them and give them their own interpretation. And it's so fascinating to read the different kind of nuggets of story that come from their research and their diving into history, because a lot of these texts were, from thousands of years ago. So you've heard of Homer, who wrote the Odyssey, and then there's Hesiod, who wrote Works and Days, and who kind of told more about all the different Greek gods and goddesses and their roles, and when we see different constellations in the sky and what they mean. And I just really love story and finding out what the rules were back then and kind of what the rules are now, kind of how they've evolved through history. Like, for example, Persephone being stuck in the underworld for 6 months, not being able to leave. That's fascinating to me. Why can't she leave? She's a goddess. And so that's explored in Relic of Thieves. There are these frameworks that I stick within, but then I start questioning them. Like, why is this? Why is this the rule? How can I find a loophole in that rule? How can I bend that rule to create this kind of new immersive world that kids and adults can get lost in?
Yeah. I love bending rules. I love finding loopholes. I wish I had found a loophole. Freshman year of high school, we had to read the Odyssey, and so my dad thought it'd be cool if I read the original translation in the Old English. And
oh my goodness,
yeah, that helped me earn my first E. Wasn't a great start to my my high school career. So again, so I'm imagining it'd be really fun to kind of have those what if questions as we're reading Relic of Thieves. Well, what kind of specific what if questions do you think families might want to tackle?
That is a good question. So in Relic of Thieves, there are laws of the gods. I've established some laws that are not written, they're not true mythological laws of the gods. But I wrote them for the story for a very good reason, because I needed some rules of the magic system that I introduced in this world for Anya to break accidentally. And so I think some of the good what if questions would be, what if your best friend had to move away suddenly? What would you do in that situation? Would you take the chance on borrowing this magical relic, these keys from the goddess of ghosts, who's Hecate? Because that's what Anya does. She finds these keys. She hears that they can take her anywhere she wants to be. So she borrows them to get back to her best friend Lizzie, who is now in another state, and Anya misses her terribly. And so a lot of the questions are, what would you do? What if Anya hadn't taken those keys? How would her life be different if she hadn't taken that chance, if she hadn't been brave enough? And the story of Anya is about bravery. It's about finding your voice. It's about finding the story that you have locked inside you that you're afraid of letting out, or you're afraid of seizing and taking control of. And so as families read this book, I think there's a lot of what ifs that are introduced that Anya has to face. And it would be a good question maybe to pause sometimes and say, well, what if Anya didn't have that choice? How else could she get out of this?
Yeah. That's why it's so wonderful for us to continue to read with our kids when they become independent readers, when they get into middle grade novels, when they get into YA titles. I don't necessarily expect a family to curl up on the couch and read The Underworld together, but I know there are some that will do that. But, pick up 2 copies of the book, go get an ebook and a physical copy and co-read, and then come together on the way to school. You're spending, every family is spending 20 minutes together in the van, going to school, going to ballet, going to soccer. And so shut off the radio and then start having these conversations, because you're going to learn about what's happening, what your kids think about the book. But it's going to open up so many more questions and answers about what's going on in their life. And
Absolutely, yes.
that's a sneaky parenting technique that you can use, and it's helpful for everybody because kids don't want to open up about a lot of stuff, especially when we're talking directly about their lives. But they'll talk about Anya, and you
Mm-hmm.
can get some good insights.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that they'll talk about the other creatures that, are non-human creatures, the messenger ravens. They have a conflict that Anya has to help them solve, which is a fun way to kind of go, okay, how would I do that? Like if you had a friend who is in the situation, what would you do? Like, who would you go to for help? What do you think that you could do to help? And I think that's a really wonderful conversation to have between a parent and a child. Like, what do you see the conflict is? How would you help fix it? What do you think is fair or unfair about the situation? And it's really fun to hear their responses.
Yeah.
I have a child myself. He's a young teenager now, and I still talk to him every day. I love hearing what he has to say. I love hearing his questions, and I love asking him things like, "Oh, what did you think of this?" and hearing his response, because it opens my eyes like, "Oh, that's how you think, and that's what you're dealing with, and this is your experience right now." And then we have conversations that we bounce off from those initial questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you gotten to the point with your child that, there's a lot of stuff that we don't look at in the same way, and you have different opinions. And, when did you start differing from the way I think? It's hard, but it's what should happen.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Like, watching them grow into their own person is such an honor. It really is.
Yeah. You mentioned that the Underwilds is a series, that Relic of Thieves is book 2 in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know how many books there are going to be?
Well, I'm currently working on book 3, which is very exciting. I'm loving writing the story. And it also deals with Greek mythology. It's set in the Underworld again. This one does go some other places as well. So I am very excited to be able to talk about it more. Right now, all I can say is that we follow a different main character, but both Senka from book 1 and Anya from book 2 are in it. And this third person forms a very important third part of the trio. And they all work together. Their stories just dovetail beautifully.
Awesome. Any chance that at some point the Greek mythology that you're following is going to bump into, say, Irish mythology or Asian mythology, just to kind of give it a fusion?
It would be amazing if we could make that happen. Yeah, I would love to, work with another author on that to bring in some more of those aspects.
All right. Well, if there's somebody out there listening and they want to get in touch with you because they think, oh, this could be a good collab. Or if there's somebody who wants to find out more about the Underworld Relic of Thieves and find out more about you, where can they go?
I have a website. So my website is www.shanatartogsz.com. And so that is where you can find out more about my books and more about me.
Awesome. We've had a really fun time speaking to the author of the Underworld Relic of Thieves. It is the new middle grade novel from our guest, Shana Tartogsz. Shana, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful.
Hey, this episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by AspireDrinks.com. Hey, I have a quick question for you. Have you ever wanted a little extra energy, but not the kind that makes your heart race or leaves you crashing an hour later? Well, that's exactly why I want to tell you about Aspire Drinks. You'll find them at AspireDrinks.com. Aspire calls itself a healthy energy drink, and honestly, that description really fits. Instead of loading you up with sugar or extreme caffeine, Aspire delivers a gentle, steady boost with 80 milligrams of natural caffeine from green tea and guarana. That's about half the caffeine of most energy drinks, enough to help you stay focused without the jitters or the crash. It's also 0 sugar, 0 calories, and 0 artificial additives, which makes it a great choice for parents, teachers, and anyone trying to make healthier choices while still getting things done. And get this, it actually tastes great, light, crisp, and lightly sparkling, with flavors like sweet cherry, raspberry acai, mango lemonade. That's what I love. No heavy aftertaste and easy on the stomach. Aspire is packed with B and C vitamins, biotin, and ginger. And it's vegan, gluten-free, keto-friendly, really designed for real life. And just for Reading with Your Kids listeners, you can get an exclusive discount of 20% off. That's the highest discount available when you shop at aspiredrinks.com and use our promo code READ. That's READ at aspiredrinks.com. Healthy energy done right.
Attention, this important consumer alert is brought to you by CBC Funding. Hey, did you know it's possible to receive upfront money from your structured settlement, annuity, or pending lawsuit? It's true. If you are receiving a structured settlement spread out over time and you want a lump sum amount delivered immediately, then you need to call CBC Funding. With your cash today, you can pay off credit card debt, pay medical bills, fund your education, or improve your home. You don't need to wait. Structured settlements are commonly used to resolve personal injury lawsuits. Annuities, they're designed to spread payments out over 10 or 20 years. For many of you in need of money today, this simply does not work. If you have a structured settlement and you want cash now, call CBC's Settlement Funding. Here's the number.
800-442-0665. 800-442-0665. That's 800-442-0665.
This episode of Reading with Your Kids is sponsored by Ramble Office. You know, before I tell you about Ramble Office, let me tell you about what travel used to look like for me. When I take the Reading with Your Kids studio on the road, it was like a lot. I had one box for the mixer, another case for microphones, a satchel for my laptop, cables everywhere. And I always felt like I was forgetting something. That's why Ramble Office really clicked with me. Rambo takes everything I used to juggle, tech gear, personal stuff, and puts it into one smart, great-looking unit that's designed to be a mobile office, not just luggage. Everything has a place. Everything stays protected. And when you get to where you're going, you're ready to work. Instead of digging through bags or repacking your life every time you move, Rambo keeps your setup organized and ready to deploy. Travel days stop being chaos and start being productive. It's sleek, modern, built for people whose work doesn't stop just because they're on the move. And if your job follows you, whether that's podcasting, teaching, consulting, or creating, Ramble is worth a look. Go to rambleofficeanywhere.com, all one word, rambleofficeanywhere.com. Use the promo code READ, R-E-A-D, and receive 5% off any product. It's exclusive for Reading with Your Kids listeners. Check it out today, rambleofficeanywhere.com, promo code READ. I am so looking forward to this conversation. Our guest is returning to Reading with Your Kids to celebrate her new middle grade book. It's a series called Fairy Tales Verses. Please welcome back to the show, Tiffany Obeng. Tiffany, how are you?
I'm good. Hi, Jed. Thanks for having me again.
Excited to have you back on. You were on the show maybe 5-6 years ago. So much has happened. The world went into and came out of a pandemic. I went into and out of a wheelchair. It's life is wonderful. A little crazy sometimes, but wonderful. And you are, in addition to being an author of this great series that we'll be talking about, you're also the driving force behind Sugar Cookie Books. And I think when we first spoke, you had maybe 3 or 4 titles, and now you have over 20.
Right. And I want to say when we first spoke, if it was in 2020, I just had the one.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like you said, now I have over 20. So I've been hard at work. 2021 was really when I started publishing a whole bunch of books really quickly. I just got like a little spark, and I was very inspired and motivated to try to make a little mark or dent in the literary space, particularly for underrepresented children in literature. And so that was like my motivation, and it continued on. But now I've slowed back down. So I'm releasing like 1 or 2 books a year again.
Well, you know, it's amazing. We're living in a time right now where an author doesn't have to get permission from a gatekeeper to get a book published. And we're also living in a time where, you know, a traditional book, from the time it's bought, this blew me away when I had a publisher on, and he told me that, it can take anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 years from the time he buys a manuscript to the time it gets on the shelf. I remember hearing that thinking, man, I'm too old to be writing kids' books. I can't wait that long.
No, that's exactly right. And it can shelve it too.
Mm-hmm.
So before we got on, I was telling you about this book that was published with Simon & Schuster, but I had been contracted to write a different book. I was paid for it, but it got shelved. So it's never seen the light of day. And I don't know if it ever will. And then the book that was published, The Story of Maya Angelou, it was shelved and then it got published. So, you just never know. And it does take a while. It can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fairy tales versus, I really like the concept here. Tell us about it.
Yes. Okay. So it was inspired by the retellings or science retellings of fairy tales. And I always thought that was really cool when I came across a retelling from the science perspective of fairy tales. And I was like, man, I wish I could do something cool like that. And then one day I was walking up the stairs and I said, oh, I can do a legal version because I'm an attorney by day. And so, yes, so what I do with the Fairy Tale Versus series is take classic fairy tales and do a little legal twist. So we have our main character, the protagonist, Olivia Odemeyer. She's a young owlet and she's the judge of Woodland Forest. And her character is kind of modeled off of me in the sense that although she's trusted by her forest friends to have this type of role, she doubts herself. She has a little bit of imposter syndrome and she's always wondering like, am I going to make the right decision, the fair decision? I don't want anyone mad at me or anything like that. So I wanted Olivia Odemeyer, the judge, to be relatable to children and to just really get the message across that you don't have to know everything immediately and you don't have to be perfect to still be trusted and to still do what's right. And then, so the first book in the Fairy Tale Versus collection or series was The Three Pigs versus the Wolf. And so you might notice that it's not called The Three Little Pigs or The Big Bad Wolf. And that was intentional because I wanted to add a little bit of objectivity to the idea because it's they're going to court. So you always you think you know the story, you think you know how it's going to end. But what you're going to find when you read these books is that we're really just trying to get to restorative justice, if you will. We just want things to end fairly. We want reconciliation. We're not trying to punish anyone or what have you. And so it's really clever arguments that's made. I use a lot of research a lot of other fairy tale retellings to kind of get like pieces from other and ideas from other stories to kind of make the arguments and things, but it's really good. And yeah, I guess I'll pause right there.
Okay. I'm not quite sure how we can look at the wolf. We won't say big bad wolf in a more subtle way, but that's one of the fun things about books is that we get introduced to different ways of looking at things.
Yes, and that's exactly right. And so you're going to, hear both sides of the story. You think like, okay, well, the wolf flew down their homes and tried to bow down the other home and he tried to eat the pig. So how are you even defending yourself? And one of the rules of law is that you're innocent until proven guilty, one. But it's just really fun how it all goes down. So the three pigs, they represent themselves. They're pro se. But they represent themselves in the matter. And the wolf, he's represented by Carl Coyote, who makes an appearance in the second book because I loved his character. My son hated his character. He was like, oh my gosh, that's not right. That's not why he did it. And I'm like, he's a zealous advocate. And so Carl is like very theatrical and he like has all these clever arguments to defend the wolf. And it's really fun and funny. And the characters are really just animated. And so at the end of the day, we get to the fair decision. I don't want to give too much away, but they sue pigs and we get to the decision.
Now, the coyote lawyer, is he based on any real life lawyers that we may be familiar with from television or?
That is hilarious. No, he's not based off a real lawyer, but I do have a penchant, if you will, for kind of going for the underdogs. And so, pun intended, but no, he was just something that was fun. And as I was creating his character, I just liked him being very dramatic, very theatrical, and just like a hate to love character. Like that's what I thought about when I thought about Carl Coyote. Like who can really defend the wolf or the big bad wolf? And so Carl was a character and him being flamboyant and have flair and just coming out of being very nuanced was just the inspiration behind him.
Now, and what was one of the arguments used against the wolf who was trying to eat the pigs is like, hey, members of the jury, did you guys have bacon this morning? What's
kind of. So I used this I pulled this from another fractured fairy tale retelling, which was, and I think it was the real story or the true story behind the three little pigs at the wolf side of the story, I want to say. Uh-huh. But the wolf, if I'm in the right story, the wolf in that story says that he was hungry, so a big part of his defense is that I was not trying to blow down your homes. I was not trying to eat you. I was just hungry. So you have to see how that plays out.
Now, this is going to be a series. What other fictional fairy tale courtroom dramas are we going to experience?
Yes. Okay. So I told you how my son was like, I had Carl Coyote, why, blah, blah, blah. And so since there's such a strong reaction to Carl Coyote, and since I loved him so much, I brought him back in my second one, which is Goldilocks versus the Three Bears. Yes, you heard that right. Uh-huh. So Goldilocks is suing the Three Bears in this retelling. And I wanted to kind of flip things on his head. I didn't want it to be predictable. So you already have the first book. And those who write series or collections of books, you got to have it has to be consistent and similar, but you still have to have something different. And so I didn't want it to be, of course, the Three Bears would sue Goldilocks, because she's the one that, went into their homes and broke things and fell asleep in their bed and ate their food. So of course I didn't want that. So what I did, and at first my son was like, I don't think that's going to work. But as I started rolling it out, he's like, yeah, bears, why y'all do that to her? So in legal terms, Goldilocks is suing the Three Bears for defamation of character. And in kid terms, Goldilocks is suing the Three Bears for calling her names that she says is not true and is causing her harm in the forest.
Okay. All right. Right off the bat, this is a great way to introduce kids to the law and some concepts that are part of our legal system.
Yes, very much so. And in a way that is fun and engaging. So with the first book, there's character cutouts that you can download for free currently, color, cut it out, hold it up, because I wanted it to be something that has a lot of dialogue so it could be acted out. That's how I pictured it in my mind. So yeah, it's supposed to be engaging way to think about, again, objectivity, fairness, not jumping to conclusions, and, trusting yourself, trusting your instincts as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I really do love that. And I think, every other show on TV or on streaming services has something to do with the law. So we all have a real fascination about it. And let's start getting kids talking about it at an early age and with their parents.
Yes, the parents have a fun time. So what's funny about this book and what I was telling you, Jed, was that kids, of course, like it, but the parents, even if they don't have a little one in their lives, once I tell them okay, this is what's happening. Three pigs are suing the wolf for property destruction, and Goldilocks is suing the bears for calling her bad names after she done went tramping through their house. They're like, hold on, I got to read this story for myself. So adults are getting the books because they're just so fascinated by the concepts. And it's a quick read because it is a beginner chapter book. It's a quick read and it's a fun read.
Yeah. I have to ask you, you're a mom, you're an attorney. Where do you find time to write all these books?
Oh, in the pockets. So I was just thinking today, because today and this week and a few weeks have been kind of really busy at work. And so my brain is at a level 1%. And so I'm like, if I had to write today, I wouldn't be writing anything today, which is the beauty of being, your own author and publisher. So I just write in the pocket. So whenever I get free time or or I put a deadline on myself. So for Goldilocks versus the Three Bears, I wanted to run a promotion with Fussy Librarian in March. And so I was like, okay, well, I need to have my book done by March. So I kind of fast tracked it or really started focusing on it sometime mid last year so I can kind of get it to where it needs to be so it could be published and ready for public consumption. Then I moved that deadline up because I had an event last weekend, matter of fact. And I was like, well, I want a hard copy so I can debut it at the event and all those things. So I find time. And sometimes when I do put a deadline upon myself, that also gives me the motivation to get going.
I'm curious, have you had an occasion where perhaps a judge has read the book and said, counselor, I don't like the ruling that was made in the Goldilocks case?
I haven't had a judge, but that would be so interesting. And I do have discussion questions at the back of the book. And one of the discussion questions is, do you agree with the ruling? Or what would you have done differently? And so it is open to discussion because, I mean, it is my point of view. And I think it leads you to pretty much how you can understand how Olivia got to that ruling. I feel like it's written in a way you can understand how she got there. And even though, and everybody ends up, pretty happy at the end. So,
how important was it for you to allow girls to see themselves represented as a judge, as a powerful figure in the legal system?
That is such a good question. So a number of my books, an overwhelming majority of my books do feature Black boy characters. And so I do get the question of where's the girl version or things like that. And so with Olivia Odemeyer, I did make a conscious decision to have a girl, but it was more because, again, it was like kind of inspired by me and what I didn't see on TV. I didn't see any lawyers that looked like me on TV. And the scripted lawyers on TV are always so articulate, always so persuasive. They always know the answer to everything immediately. And that was very, not disconcerting, but it impacts you when you're like the first lawyer in your family trying to make your way and you don't see anyone or other examples of real lawyers. And so, I have had readers or parents be like, oh my gosh, because Olivia has a big set of glasses. Now that wasn't inspired by me, but she's an owl. So she has like a big set of glasses on her face. And so I have had a parent who's like, oh my gosh, my niece loved this book and she loved the owl because she loves that she has big glasses like her.
That's fantastic. You have written a number of different series. Do you remember the first book that we chatted about?
Andrew Learns About Actors.
Yes. About actors.
It was the first book ever, and that was the first series. The Andrew Learns About Career Book series is my first series. It's currently on 7 books, so currently we're exploring 7 careers. And then I also have a seasons book collection, so you have, of course, all 4 seasons. And I think this Fairy Tale Verses is the 3rd series that I have.
Am I right in remembering that I made a joke about, does Andrew learn that most actors are waiters?
You did.
Well, life. you
gotta start somewhere.
Oh boy. Hey, what do you, how many, books in the, Fairy Tales Versus series are you envisioning?
So I've told myself 3. And so, that goes to the question you asked me earlier. So I told myself 3. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what is the 3rd fairy tale. And maybe you, Jed, have an opinion. I'm kind of battling between Hansel and Gretel, the story of Hansel and Gretel, and Jack and the Beanstalk. So if you have any ideas that's percolating, please let me know. But yeah, right now I just said, I'll do 3 and I'll be done. But you never know. I might get inspired and can't decide between the 2 and do, another 2. But right now I'm only convincing myself that I'm doing 3.
Well, I think Jack and the Beanstalk could be ideal for that legal situation. I mean, the little guy still, you get the beans, he stole the thing and chopped that. Yeah, Yeah, I could see looking at that from the Giants' perspective.
The Giants' perspective. Okay. Thank you, Jed. I was thinking about that as well. Okay, we're kind of aligned.
What is it? What's that when you do something and someone gets hurt?
That's a good one.
Yeah, cause
like negligence.
Negligence. Yeah. You should have envisioned. You chopped down the beanstalk, and it's like, and you were kind of intentional doing that.
Yes, after stealing his things out of his home.
That's right.
I read a Jack story retelling, and they were saying that Jack was stealing. Well, he didn't steal the goose. He was saving the golden goose from the giant. And so I thought that was interesting. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, how does that come to play? Does it come into play if I added that as part of the story?
I definitely could. Boy, lawyers, man, they twist things. And I mean, no, lawyers have this great perspective. No, but that is, I mean, in all seriousness, this is a fun way just to get kids thinking about the fact that we all see things from a different perspective.
Yes.
And right now we're living in a time where here in the United States and around the world, we're at the point, there's a lot of people, it's like, it's black or white. There's no gray. There's no middle ground. There's no take a moment to look and say, well, maybe she's seeing things in a different way. And why might she be thinking that way? And would it be smart for me to take a minute and put myself in that person's shoes? And I think this is a great, fun way to start getting kids to ask those kind of questions.
That's exactly right. I'm so glad you brought up perspective because, yes, that was another goal of mine of, depending on where you're sitting or standing or what facts you have or information you have, your perspective can shift. So, again, you think you know the stories of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You think you know the story of Three Pigs versus the Three Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf. But what if there was more information? What if there wasn't everything that you didn't have all the information and now it's being presented and now you can make a real decision on what really happened.
I like it. I like it. And I think I can envision, especially my son, because my son, I've said this on the podcast in the past, from the moment my son was able to talk, which was like about a half hour after he came out of the womb, he just lived by this motto of why should I use one word when there are 75 others that can answer this question? And I really thought he was going to be a lawyer. But he's the kind of kid that when he was younger would have just loved this, would have eaten this series up and then gone on to look at other tales and just, what about, let me think about this fairy tale over here. And what about,
I love that. Okay. You made me think of an activity when you said that.
There you go.
Like maybe I'm doing too much work. Maybe I need some help from the people. Like you just helped me.
Maybe we could do a fairy tales versus board game.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. She's like, don't make my life harder, please.
Exactly.
I have a quick question. What Sugar Cookie Books? Where'd that name come from?
Oh, yeah. So the quick version is I came up with Sugar Cookie Books because I was thinking about something unique in the event I wanted to trademark it, and I was able to successfully trademark my company name. And so I was like, thought of Apple computers because I think that was one of the examples in trademarking for dummies, Apple computers. So that got me off into food. And then I started thinking about snickerdoodles. I don't know why, but the cookie snickerdoodle. And I was like, I don't like how that sounds. And then I was like, chocolate chip cookies are very popular. Everybody loves them. They're everywhere. They're timeless. They're a classic. They're trusted. Like you can't go anywhere. And if there's a dessert, there's going to be a chocolate chip cookie. Then I was like, well, that's a lot of words. And I prefer sugar cookie. And I was like, that's just as good as chocolate chip. It's everywhere too. So that's how we got to Sugar Cookie Books. Okay. So it can invoke that feeling.
Excellent. And being an attorney, you get to trademark that for a lot less money than I trademarked something.
Right. I was crossing my fingers and eyes though. I was like, oh my gosh, because you got to pay the money regardless if they approve it or not.
Right. Hey, Tiffany, tell us where we can go to find out more about Fairy Tales Versus and find out about all the books that are available from Sugar Cookie Books.
Sure. So sugarcookiebooks.com is the website. You can also follow me at Sugar Cookie Books on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn if you want.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Fairy Tales Versus. It's a great new series from our guest, Tiffany Obing. Tiffany, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Hey, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and would join us for the next exciting episode of the show. If this episode made you smile or gave you something to think about, please consider sharing a link to the show with someone you love. If this episode inspired you, please leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite shows. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Shana Tartogsz. Please be sure to check out the Underworld, Relic of Thieves. Also want to thank Tiffany Obeng. Please be sure to check out her great Fairy Tales versus Middle Grade series. Want to thank my team, Chris Doherty, Jackson Sandolero. Want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. That's right, we want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and most of all, thank you for taking the time to make the world a better, more loving, more empathetic place. And you absolutely do that every single time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.